Your family doesn't belong here anymore!
Doris! My daughter just stopped breathing.
Emma collapsed on our driveway while Brenda Castellano stood 20 feet away, screaming about unauthorized vehicles. My daughter, my 16-year-old baby girl, who'd already lost her mother, wasn't breathing. And in the chaos of my brothers trying to save her life, the board chair was still citing HOA violations. "Step back from the minor," Brenda's voice cut through the evening air like a blade. "I've called the police about armed, suspicious individuals on this property." My brother Kyle, still in his SWAT gear from an earlier call-out, had his fingers pressed against Emma's neck, searching for a pulse. James was on his phone with 911, and this woman, this absolute monster, was filming everything with her cell phone, her crimson blazer catching the last rays of sunset like a warning flag. "She's not breathing right," Kyle said, his tactical training kicking in. "Marcus, get the AED from my vehicle." I sprinted toward the SWAT transport van parked in my driveway, the same van that had triggered Brenda's latest tantrum. Emma had been laughing just 10 minutes ago, surrounded by her uncles at her own birthday party. Now, she was dying on the concrete while the enforcer in crimson documented evidence for her case against us. If you've ever watched someone powerful destroy what you love most, while you stood helpless, hit subscribe right now. The sirens were getting closer. Emma's lips were turning blue. Kyle had started chest compressions, his massive hands surprisingly gentle against her small frame. James was talking to the dispatcher, his hostage negotiator voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "I have documentation of every violation," Brenda announced to no one in particular, still recording. "This is exactly why we have rules about—" "Shut up." My voice came out cold, flat. Marine Corps calm. "My daughter is dying, and you're worried about parking violations." The clipboard queen actually stepped back. Maybe she heard something in my tone that reminded her I'd spent 15 years in situations where split-second decisions meant life or death. Maybe she finally realized she'd pushed too far. The ambulance screamed into our cul-de-sac. Paramedics flooded our driveway, their efficient movements pushing us back. One of them got a pediatric oxygen mask over Emma's face. Another was calling out vitals I didn't understand. All I could see was her hand, limp and pale. The friendship bracelet she'd made with Dale Pritchard's granddaughter still wrapped around her wrist, before Brenda had forced that friendship to end, too. "Stress-induced cardiac episode," the lead paramedic said as they lifted Emma onto the gurney. "How long has she been under extreme psychological stress?" I looked at Brenda. She looked at her phone, still recording. 6 months, I said. Continuous harassment for 6 months. They loaded Emma into the ambulance. James climbed in with her, his EMT certification making him the logical choice. Kyle stood beside me as the ambulance pulled away, both of us still in shock. That's when the police arrived. 2 patrol cars, lights flashing. "We received a report of armed suspicious individuals," the first officer said, hand near his weapon as he assessed Kyle's tactical gear. Brenda stepped forward, triumphant. "Officer, these men are—" "SWAT Team 6, Kyle interrupted, pulling his badge. "And that was my niece your complainant just put in an ambulance." The officer's expression shifted. He looked at Brenda, then at the HOA violation notice still clutched in her hand. They thought I was just another broken widower trying to hold his family together. They didn't know I'd spent my entire adult life planning tactical operations, documenting enemy movements, waiting for the perfect shot. Brenda Castellano had just put crosshairs on herself. The hospital waiting room smelled like antiseptic and fear. 2 a.m, and I couldn't stop seeing Emma's blue lips, her limp hand, the way her eyes had rolled back before she hit the concrete. James sat beside me, still in his uniform, coffee growing cold in his hands. Kyle had gone to move the SWAT van, finally, but he'd be back. My brothers didn't abandon missions, and Emma was the most important mission any of us had ever had. "Mr. Chen?" A doctor emerged from the double doors, clipboard in hand. Not the clipboard queen's weapon of choice. This one actually mattered. "Your daughter's stable. The cardiac episode was stress-induced, but we need to talk about what we found." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "Come with me." Emma looked so small in that hospital bed, monitors beeping steadily, IV in her arm. She was asleep, finally peaceful. But when the doctor pulled back her sleeve, I saw what I'd somehow missed. Thin white scars crisscrossed her left wrist, some old, some newer, some that looked like they'd been made this week. "She's been self-harming," the doctor said quietly. "The psychiatric team will want to do a full evaluation in the morning, but her therapist is already here. Dr. Patel requested to be called immediately if Emma ever had a medical emergency." Dr. Patel appeared in the doorway, her expression grave. She'd been working with Emma since Sarah died, helping her process the grief, the anxiety, the PTSD of losing her mother to cancer. I thought we were making progress. "Marcus, can we talk outside?" The hallway was worse than the room. At least in there, I could see Emma breathing. "Your daughter has been in crisis for months," Dr. Patel said, her voice gentle but firm. "She's been hiding it well during our sessions, but the environmental stressors have overwhelmed her coping mechanisms." "Environmental stressors?" I repeated. "The HOA situation." She pulled out her notes. "Emma told me 3 weeks ago that she was terrified they would take your house, that you'd have nowhere to live, that you'd lose your wife's memorial bench, and she'd have nowhere to remember her mother. She said she was cutting herself to feel something other than scared." The floor shifted under my feet. "She never said anything to me. She didn't want to burden you. You've been under attack too." Dr. Patel hesitated. "Marcus, tonight's cardiac episode wasn't random. When Emma saw the police arriving, when she heard that woman threatening to have you arrested, her nervous system essentially shut down. This is what happens when fight or flight has nowhere to go. Her body chose neither. It just stopped. Fight or flight. The tyrant in heels had triggered a survival response so extreme that my daughter's heart had nearly given up. If the HOA forces a sale of your home," Dr. Patel continued, "I'm not certain Emma will survive the emotional trauma. That house, that neighborhood, your wife's bench, they're her anchors. And the monthly gatherings with your brothers, those are her only social interactions where she feels safe. Someone has been systematically destroying every support structure keeping your daughter alive." I leaned against the wall, processing. Brenda Castellano hadn't just harassed us. She'd weaponized my daughter's grief. "Mr. Chen?" I turned. Dale Pritchard stood at the end of the hallway, looking older than his 67 years. His eyes were red, his hands shaking. "I saw everything," he said. "I was walking my dog when Emma fell. When that woman just kept yelling about violations while your brothers tried to save her." He stepped closer, voice dropping. "My granddaughter used to be Emma's best friend. Did you know that? Before Brenda threatened my family if we didn't stop the girls from seeing each other. She said Emma was unstable influence because of your military connections. The officer of rules had isolated Emma from her last remaining friend." "I need to tell you something," Dale continued, glancing down the hallway like he expected Brenda to materialize. "Something I should have told you months ago. But I was afraid. I'm still afraid." He pulled out his phone, showed me a text from earlier tonight. "Your testimony better be perfect tomorrow, or your property taxes aren't the only thing I'll reassess." "She sent that?" I asked. 2 hours before Emma collapsed. Dale's voice cracked. "I'm the HOA treasurer. I keep the records, all of them. And I've been watching Brenda destroy families for 8 years because I was too scared to stop her." He looked at Emma through the window, his granddaughter's former best friend hooked to machines. "I'm not scared anymore," he whispered. "I'm angry." I got home just after dawn, exhausted but unable to sleep. Emma was being kept for observation. 24 hours minimum, Dr. Patel said. James stayed at the hospital. Kyle had finally gone home to his own family, promising to return by noon. The house felt wrong without Emma in it. Too quiet, too empty. I walked through rooms still decorated for her birthday party. Balloons sagging, cake half-eaten on the kitchen counter, presents, unopened on the dining table. 16 candles we never got to light. My phone buzzed. A group text from my brothers. "Kyle, coming over, need to talk." James, already texted him the situation. "This is bigger than we thought." 20 minutes later, all 3 of them sat around my kitchen table. Kyle had brought coffee. James had brought his laptop. My youngest brother, David, I'd forgotten to mention him in the chaos, had driven 2 hours from Colorado Springs the moment he heard. "Okay," James said, opening his computer. "Let's treat this like a tactical briefing. What do we actually know?" We spent the next hour reconstructing the timeline. Every citation, every violation notice, every threatening letter from the board chair over the past 6 months. 14 separate incidents. Not one of them issued to any other resident in Oak Haven Estates during the same period. I'd checked the HOA website's enforcement log. "Look at the dates," David said, pointing at the screen. "Every single citation happened when we were here. Family gatherings, birthday parties. That weekend we helped you rebuild the deck." Kyle leaned back, his hostage negotiator training kicking in. "This isn't about rules. This is psychological warfare. She's trying to isolate Marcus by eliminating his support system." "Why?" David asked. "What's the strategic goal?" I pulled up Brenda Castellano's real estate website on my phone, something I'd avoided looking at before. Her bio made my blood run cold. Specializing in Oak Haven Estates, helping families find their perfect homes, and maintaining our community's exceptional standards. 8 of her current listings were in our neighborhood. Every single one advertised as being in peaceful, well-regulated community with strict standards. "She's using the HOA to control property values," I said slowly. "Single dad with PTSD kid and military brothers visiting in the tactical gear, that's not the image she wants for her listings." James pulled up county records. "She owns 4 rental properties in this development. If she can force out residents she considers problematic and replace them with families that match her marketing image. She increases her property values and gets more commission on sales," Kyle finished. "We're not people to her, we're obstacles to profit." The realization settled over us like a cold rain. The enforcer in Crimson wasn't enforcing rules. She was curating a neighborhood like it was her personal real estate portfolio. "Emma's just collateral damage," I said quietly. "No." James closed his laptop, his expression hard. "Emma's a victim. There's a difference. And Brenda Castellano just committed a crime." "What crime?" David asked. "Reckless endangerment at minimum. She called the police claiming armed suspicious individuals while knowing full well we're law enforcement. She created a situation that could have resulted in officer-involved shooting." He looked at me. "And her months of harassment directly caused Emma's medical emergency. That's a pattern of behavior causing measurable harm." I hadn't thought about it that way. I'd been so focused on defending our home that I hadn't considered offense. "We need documentation," Kyle said. "Everything. Timestamps, recordings, witness statements. We build a case file like she's a hostile target." "I can help with that." We all turned. Dale Pritchard stood at my back door, visible through the window. I'd left it unlocked when the ambulance came. Hadn't even thought to secure the house. I let him in. He looked like he hadn't slept, still wearing the same clothes from last night, his dog's leash in one hand and a banker's box in the other. "I need to sit down," he said, and his hands were shaking so badly the box almost slipped. We cleared space at the table. Dale set the box down carefully, like it contained explosives. Maybe it did. "I've been HOA treasurer for 8 years, he began, not meeting anyone's eyes. "I keep meticulous records, minutes from every meeting, every email exchange, every financial transaction. It's what architects do. We document everything." He opened the box. Inside were manila folders, organized by year, labeled in neat handwriting. "Brenda doesn't know I keep personal copies. She thinks everything's just in the HOA's digital system that she controls." His voice was steady now, like confessing gave him strength. "But I couldn't. I watched her destroy the Hendersons' lives 2 years ago, force them out over a fence dispute that she manufactured. They had a special needs daughter who loved that house." David pulled out a folder marked 2023. Inside were email chains showing the tyrant in heels coordinating with other board members to target specific residents. "There's more," Dale continued. "Financial records showing she's been approving HOA expenditures with companies she has undisclosed ownership in. She's been self-dealing for years, using HOA funds to improve her rental properties while claiming they're community maintenance projects." "That's fraud," James said. "Yes." Dale finally looked up, meeting my eyes. "And I let it happen because I was afraid she'd come after my family. She threatened my wife's spot on the garden committee. Implied she'd make trouble for my son's business permit application. Stupid small things that seemed too petty to risk everything over." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his phone, showed us a photo. 2 little girls, maybe 10 years old, laughing in a backyard pool. That's my granddaughter Hannah with Emma, 3 years ago, before... His voice cracked. Hannah cries every time she sees Emma at school now. They're not allowed to talk. Brenda said if my family associated with unstable elements, she'd reassess our property's code compliance and find violations. The officer of rules had weaponized friendship. I'm a coward, Dale whispered, but I'm also a grandfather. And last night, watching another child collapse because of that woman's cruelty. I can't anymore. I just can't. He pushed the entire box toward me. This is 8 years of evidence. Everything you need to prove Brenda Castellano has been running this HOA like her personal fiefdom. Use it. End her. Emma came home from the hospital 2 days later, pale and quiet. Dr. Patel had prescribed bed rest and increased therapy sessions. My daughter barely spoke, just nodded when I asked if she needed anything, then retreated to her room with the door closed. I heard her crying through the walls that first night. Soft, broken sounds that cut deeper than any HOA citation ever could. The medical bills arrived the next morning. $47,000 for emergency treatment, psychiatric evaluation, and overnight observation. Our insurance would cover most of it, but the deductible alone was $6,000. Money I'd been saving for Emma's college fund. The second envelope that arrived made the first one look like a love letter. Notice of Emergency HOA Board Meeting in bold red letters across the top. Rabir, Immediate Resident Removal Petition, 2247 Oakmont Drive, our address. I read it 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding. But no, Brenda Castellano had filed an emergency petition to force us out of our home. The meeting was scheduled for 5 days from now, and according to the bylaws, she only needed a majority board vote to initiate forced sale proceedings. The attached documentation made my hands shake. 23 pages of evidence against us. Photos of my brother's vehicles with captions like, unidentified tactical personnel, frequent property. Noise complaints I'd never been notified about, all allegedly filed by neighbors I'd never had problems with. A section titled, Concerns Regarding Firearms and Potential Militia Activity, that made my security consulting business sound like I was running a domestic terror cell. The final page was a medical incident report from the night Emma collapsed, but Brenda had twisted it completely. According to her version, Emma's cardiac episode was caused by unsafe environment created by residents' unstable behavior and association with armed individuals. She'd made it sound like we'd caused Emma's collapse, not her months of systematic harassment. She's claiming you're the danger, James said when I called him. Classic Darvo, deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. Can she actually force us to sell? I asked. If she gets the board to vote yes, she can initiate proceedings. You'd have legal recourse, but it would take months and cost more than you probably have. He paused. Marcus, she's not trying to win. She's trying to bankrupt you into submission. That afternoon, I found out just how far the board chair's campaign had spread. I went to the grocery store, just needed milk and bread, basic things since Emma wasn't eating much anyway, and ran into Margaret Kowalski, a retired teacher who lived 3 streets over. We'd always been friendly. She'd even sent a card when Sarah died. She saw me and immediately looked away, practically speed-walking toward the produce section. Margaret, I called after her. She stopped but didn't turn around. I'm sorry, Marcus. I can't be seen talking to you. What are you talking about? Brenda called an emergency community meeting yesterday. She showed us photos, reports. She said you're dangerous, that your daughter's breakdown was because of you, that having armed men at your house puts everyone at risk. Margaret finally looked at me, and her eyes were scared. She said anyone who associates with your family could be considered complicit in HOA violations. The tyrant in heels had poisoned the entire neighborhood against us. I drove home in a daze, checked the community Facebook group I'd never paid much attention to before. There were posts about us, dozens of them. Anyone else concerned about the military vehicles at 2247 Oakmont? I heard the daughter had to be hospitalized because of the unsafe environment. Brenda said they're running some kind of weapons business from the house. A few brave souls tried to defend us. Carol Martinez, who'd been at Emma's birthday party, commented, I was there that night. Marcus's brothers are police officers. Brenda Castellano harassed them until that poor girl collapsed. Her comment had been deleted. and Carol's name now appeared on the emergency meeting agenda under additional code violations to address. The enforcer in crimson was systematically eliminating anyone who might support us. That evening, I sat in Emma's doorway, watching her sleep. She'd finally dozed off after refusing dinner, her face still tear-stained. The friendship bracelet from Hannah was gone. She'd cut it off and thrown it away, Dale had told me. His granddaughter had tried to visit Emma at school, but Emma had run away crying, convinced that talking to Hannah would just get the Pritchards in trouble. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is what happens when you don't belong. Sell while you still can. A concerned neighbor. I blocked the number. 3 more texts arrived from different numbers within minutes. All anonymous, all threatening. She was hunting us. The officer of rules had turned our neighborhood into hostile territory, and she wouldn't stop until we were gone. I looked at Sarah's photo on Emma's nightstand, my wife smiling in her scrubs, forever frozen at 34. We'd bought this house together, painted Emma's nursery in this house. Sarah had died in the master bedroom upstairs because she'd wanted to be home, not in some hospital when the cancer finally won. Her memorial bench was 3 blocks away, Emma's anchor to her mother's memory. Brenda Castellano wanted to take all of that. Not because we'd broken rules, but because we didn't fit her profitable narrative. I opened my laptop and started a new document. If she wanted war, I'd give her war. But not the kind she expected. I'd spent 15 years as a Marine Scout sniper. Patience, precision, and perfect timing weren't just skills. They were survival instincts. The clipboard queen had made one critical tactical error. She thought I'd fight on her terms, in her territory, using her rules. She was wrong. I couldn't sleep that night. So I did what I always did when my mind wouldn't shut down. I worked. My security consulting business meant I spent a lot of time analyzing risk, identifying vulnerabilities, understanding how systems could be exploited or protected. HOAs were systems, imperfect ones. I pulled up Oak Haven Estate's governing documents, all public record, available on the county website. Articles of incorporation, CC&Rs, insurance policies, board member requirements. I'd glanced at them when we bought the house 6 years ago, but never really studied them. 3 hours later, I found the crack in Brenda Castellano's armor. Our HOA carried a standard liability insurance policy through Mountain West Community Insurance. I knew the company. I'd done security assessments for 2 of their client properties last year. The policy was typical. Covered property damage, injuries on common areas, board member errors and omissions. But there was a clause I remembered from my previous work, a critical exclusion that most HOA boards never thought about until it was too late. I grabbed my phone and called an old client, Rick Patterson, who ran a property management company in Denver. It was 6 in the morning, but Rick was always up early. Marcus, everything okay? Quick question about HOA insurance. If a board member's actions constitute harassment or discrimination, does the policy typically cover them? Silence on the other end. Then, hell no, intentional acts are specifically excluded. Why? What if those actions cause measurable harm, medical bills, emotional distress? Then the board members are personally liable, and the insurance company will drop the HOA like a hot rock to avoid being dragged into litigation. Rick paused. Marcus, is this about your situation? I heard rumors through the property management network. Brenda Castellanos made enemies across 3 counties. Tell me more about that. Rick talked for 20 minutes. The enforcer in crimson had a reputation in Colorado real estate circles. Aggressive, vindictive, brilliant at manipulating HOA rules for personal gain. She'd been investigated twice by the State Real Estate Commission for ethics violations, but had always managed to slide through on technicalities. The thing about Brenda, Rick said, is she's gotten sloppy in the past few years, cocky. She thinks she's untouchable because she's survived complaints before, but if someone had actual evidence of self-dealing or harassment causing harm, the Real Estate Commission would crucify her. They've been wanting to make an example. I thanked Rick and hung up, mind racing. The tyrant in heels had built her empire on intimidation and exploitation. But empires had foundations, and foundations could crack. I opened a new spreadsheet and started mapping vulnerabilities. Not just Brenda's, the entire system she'd corrupted. Vulnerability. 1. HOA insurance. If I could document that her harassment caused Emma's medical emergency, the insurance company would see massive liability exposure. They'd demand her removal or drop coverage entirely. Vulnerability. 2. Real estate commission. Dale's records showed years of self-dealing and ethics violations. With proper documentation, they'd have to investigate. Vulnerability. 3. Criminal charges. Kyle was right. Calling police with false claims about armed, suspicious individuals, while knowing we were law enforcement, wasn't just unethical. It was a crime that could have gotten someone killed. Vulnerability. 4. Building and safety codes. I pulled up county records for Brenda's rental properties. If she'd been using HOA funds for community projects that actually benefited her personal properties, there might be unpermitted work, code violations, safety issues. I spent the next 2 hours making phone calls, taking notes, building a case file. Not the kind that would hold up in court, not yet, but the kind that would make powerful people pay attention. By noon, I had a strategy. Not one strategy, multiple attack vectors, all designed to converge simultaneously. The board chair wouldn't just face one threat. She'd face 6, all at once, all threatening different aspects of her business and reputation. Death by 1,000 cuts. Or, in this case, death by 4 precisely aimed strikes. Emma emerged from her room around 1 o'clock, looking slightly better. She'd showered and changed clothes, small victories I was learning to celebrate. Dad? Her voice was quiet. Can we visit Mom's bench? I wanted to say yes, wanted to take her there right now, let her have that connection to Sarah. But the thought of running into neighbors who'd been poisoned against us, or worse, running into the officer of rules herself. How about we go tonight? I suggested. When it's quieter, just you and me. She nodded, retreating back to her room. I heard her crying again through the door. The medical bills were one thing. The forced sale petition was another. But watching my daughter afraid to visit her own mother's memorial because Brenda Castellano had weaponized our entire neighborhood, that was unforgivable. I called James. I need your expertise on psychological profiles. How do you build a case against someone when you're planning to dismantle their entire operation? You treat them like a hostage taker, he said. You identify what they value most, what they fear most, and you position those things against each other until they have nowhere to go but down. What does Brenda value most? Control, reputation, money. Her real estate license is her identity and her income. Without it, she's nothing. And what does she fear? James laughed, dark and knowing. Exposure, public humiliation, being treated the way she's treated everyone else. I pulled out Dale's box of records, started photographing every document, 8 years of evidence, email chains showing her manipulating board votes, financial statements proving self-dealing, meeting minutes where she'd systematically targeted vulnerable families, single parents, elderly residents on fixed incomes, veterans with PTSD. The clipboard queen had documented her own crimes in meticulous detail, never imagining someone would compile it all in one place. Marcus? Emma appeared in my doorway again, holding something, Sarah's jewelry box. Mom would want you to fight back. She always said you were the bravest person she knew. My wife had been the brave one, facing cancer with grace I'd never have. But maybe Emma was right. Maybe Sarah would want me to protect what we'd built together. I looked at my daughter, 16 years old, scarred wrists hidden under long sleeves, eyes that had seen too much loss. We're not going anywhere, I told her. This is our home. Mom's bench is staying right where it is. And Brenda Castellano is about to learn what happens when she threatens a Marine's family. Emma almost smiled. Almost. It was enough. The next morning brought fresh hell. A certified letter from the HOA's attorney. Not just any attorney, but Jackson and Pierce, the most expensive firm in the county. Brenda Castellano was escalating, and she had money to burn. The letter demanded immediate payment of $12,500 in accumulated fines, plus $8,000 in legal fees for the emergency board meeting proceedings. If I didn't pay within 10 business days, they'd place a lien on our property. $20,000. Money I didn't have. Money that would drain Emma's college fund and our emergency savings completely. I was still staring at the letter when Dr. Patel called. Marcus, I need to see you today. It's about Emma's evaluation results. Her office was 15 minutes away. I left Emma with Kyle, who'd taken personal leave to help. My brother sat on the couch with his niece, both of them watching some cooking show in silence. Emma hadn't spoken more than 5 words all morning. Dr. Patel closed her office door and gestured for me to sit. Her expression was grave. Emma's regression is severe. The psychological assessment shows she's developed agoraphobia, fear of leaving safe spaces. She's having intrusive thoughts about her mother's death and catastrophizing about losing you in the house. The self-harm has escalated. She pulled out a chart covered in medical terminology I didn't fully understand. Marcus, your daughter is in crisis. The sustained stress from the HOA situation has fundamentally altered her brain chemistry. What does that mean? It means if you're forced to sell this house, if Emma loses her connection to her mother's memory and her support system, I'm not confident she'll survive the psychological trauma. Dr. Patel leaned forward. I don't say that lightly. Your daughter has expressed suicidal ideation 3 times in the past week. The room tilted. She's talking about killing herself? Passive ideation so far. Everyone would be better off without me. Thoughts. But Marcus, the progression from passive to active can be rapid, especially in adolescents with major depression and PTSD. She handed me another document. This is my formal recommendation that Emma remain in her current living environment for mental health stability. I'll testify to that if needed. I took the paper with shaking hands. The board meeting is in 3 days. Then you have 3 days to save your daughter's life. Dr. Patel's voice softened. I know that sounds dramatic, but I've been a child psychiatrist for 20 years. I've seen what happens when kids lose their anchors. Emma's anchors are you, her uncles, that house, and her mother's memorial bench. Remove any of those, and I lose her. I drove home in a fog. 3 days. 72 hours to dismantle Brenda Castellano's empire before she dismantled my family. The medical bills on my kitchen counter had grown. Now, I was looking at Emma's emergency hospitalization, ongoing therapy, psychiatric medications, and Dr. Patel's evaluation. $63,000 and counting. Even with insurance, we were drowning. If we lost the house, we'd lose everything. Sarah's memorial bench would stay behind. HOA property, not something we could take with us. Emma would shatter, and I'd have failed both of them. My phone rang. James. Emergency situation, he said without preamble. Kyle just got word from his sergeant. Brenda filed a formal complaint with the police department claiming Kyle and David engaged in threatening behavior during their visits to your house. She's demanding an internal affairs investigation. She's going after your careers now? She's trying to isolate you completely. If she can make us toxic, get us investigated, create enough smoke that our departments tell us to stay away from you, then Emma loses her support system and you lose your backup. James paused. Marcus, this is sophisticated psychological warfare. She's not just attacking you. She's systematically eliminating every resource you have. I looked at the photo of Sarah on our mantle, my wife in her nurse's scrubs, smiling, alive. She'd spent her career saving first responders' lives, and now the enforcer in crimson was trying to destroy the first responders who'd become our family. I need to see everything Dale gave us, I said. All of it, tonight. Can you get Kyle and David? We'll be there at 8. I hung up and walked to Emma's room. She was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, earbuds in. I knocked gently. She pulled one out. Em, I need to ask you something. It's important. She sat up slowly, wary. If we had to fight to keep this house, I mean really fight publicly, where people would know our business and talk about us, would you be okay with that? Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached under her pillow and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was worn, like she'd been reading it over and over. Mom wrote this for me before she died, for when I turned 16. Her voice cracked. She said the most important thing she could teach me was to stand up for what matters, even when you're scared, especially when you're scared. She unfolded the letter, and I saw Sarah's handwriting, shaky from the cancer treatment, but still unmistakably hers. Emma, my brave girl. Life will try to take things from you. People will try to make you small. Don't let them. You come from warriors. Dad might be quiet, but he's the strongest person I know. And you have his strength inside you. When something matters, when someone threatens what you love, you fight. Not with hate, but with courage. Make me proud. I couldn't speak. Emma folded the letter carefully and met my eyes. Mom's bench matters, she whispered. This house matters. Our family matters. I'm scared all the time, Dad, but I'm more scared of losing everything without even trying to fight. She was 16 years old, battle-scarred and broken, and somehow still braver than I'd ever been. Then we fight, I said, together. That night, my brothers and I spread Dale's evidence across my dining room table. 8 years of Brenda's crimes documented in meticulous detail. We divided the work. James would handle the real estate commission complaint. Kyle would file the police report about the false 911 call. David would research building code violations on her rental properties. I would handle the insurance company, because that's where the tyrant in heels was most vulnerable. She'd built her empire on HOA authority, but that authority required insurance coverage, and no insurance company would cover a board president whose harassment had put a child in the hospital. I drafted the email at midnight, attaching Dr. Patel's evaluation, Emma's hospital records, the timeline of Brenda's citations, witness statements, everything. Subject line: Urgent liability exposure, Oak Haven Estates HOA. I sent it to Mountain West Community Insurance's claims department and legal team. Copied the HOA board members, all 5 of them, including Dale. Then I sent a second email to the Colorado Real Estate Commission with 47 pages of evidence showing Brenda's self-dealing and ethics violations. A third email went to the county district attorney's office regarding false police reports. A fourth to the building inspector about unpermitted work on her rental properties. 4 precision strikes, all launched simultaneously at 12:47 a.m. The officer of rules would wake up to a war she never saw coming. The first response came at 6:23 a.m. Mountain West Community Insurance's legal department marked urgent. Mr. Chen, we are in receipt of your liability notice. An investigator will contact the HOA board within 24 hours. Please preserve all documentation. Second, response at 7:45 a.m. Colorado Real Estate Commission. Your complaint has been assigned case number 2024-8847. An investigator will contact you within 72 hours. Due to the serious nature of the allegations, Ms. Castellano's license status is under immediate review. I was reading the third email from the DA's office acknowledging the false report complaint when someone knocked on my door. Dale Pritchard stood on my porch, still in his pajamas and bathrobe, holding his phone like it might explode. "What did you do?" he asked, voice shaking, not angry, terrified. "Come inside." He stumbled in, and I saw the email chain on his phone screen. The HOA board's group text had erupted at dawn. Brenda Castellano demanding to know who leaked documents. Other board members panicking about the insurance investigation. The secretary threatening to resign. "She knows someone gave you the records," Dale said. "She's tearing apart every board member's house looking for who betrayed her. She showed up at Linda Morrison's door at 6 this morning, screaming about loyalty." "Let her scream," I said. "The documents are already with 4 different authorities. It's over." "You don't understand." Dale sat heavily on my couch. "Brenda doesn't lose. She finds a way to win, or she burns everything down trying. When the Hendersons fought her 3 years ago, she made their lives so miserable they left the state. The wife had a nervous breakdown. Their special needs daughter regressed so badly she stopped speaking for 8 months. I'm not the Hendersons." "No, you're not." Dale looked at me with something like awe. "You're worse. For her, I mean. She can't intimidate you because you've already lost the most important thing, your wife. She can't scare you with military threats because you are military. And now she can't bury you in legal fees because you've brought in outside authorities who don't care about her money or connections." His phone buzzed. A text from Brenda. "Emergency board meeting. My house. Now." "She's going to demand I confess," Dale said. "Threaten me, try to force me to recant everything. So, don't go. If I don't go, she'll know it was me for certain." He looked at his phone, then at me. "But if I do go, I can record it. Colorado is a one-party consent state. Anything she says to threaten me, I can document." "Dale, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." He stood up, straightened his bathrobe like it was armor. "I've been a coward for 8 years. I watched families suffer because I was too scared to stand up. But Emma, seeing that little girl collapse, remembering what Hannah used to be like before Brenda forced them apart. His voice strengthened. I'm done being afraid. He left, and I watched him walk across the cul-de-sac toward his own house, looking somehow taller than when he'd arrived. 2 hours later, my phone rang. Dale, whispering. I'm still at her house. She's insane, Marcus. Absolutely unhinged. I recorded everything. Her threatening me, admitting she targeted your family specifically because military types lower property values, bragging about how she's manipulated previous board votes through blackmail. He paused. She also just received a phone call from the insurance company. They're suspending HOA coverage effective immediately pending investigation. She's having a complete meltdown. Get out of there, I said. Now. Already leaving. I'm sending you the recording. The audio file arrived 5 minutes later. I played it on speaker so James and Kyle, who'd come over after their shifts, could hear. Brenda Castellano's voice sharp and venomous. Some traitor leaked confidential documents. When I find out who, I'll destroy them. I'll find code violations on their property. I'll tank their credit rating. I'll make them wish they'd never crossed me. Dale's voice surprisingly steady. Brenda, the insurance company is investigating. Maybe we should... I don't care about the insurance company. I've dealt with them before. I'll smooth this over like I always do. But the Chen family, they're gone. I'm pushing through the forced sale vote tonight, emergency meeting or not. I have 3 board members who owe me favors. That's all I need. Another voice. Linda Morrison, the secretary. But his daughter is in the hospital because of her father's unstable environment. That's what the record will show. The girl was already damaged goods from losing her mother. I'm protecting this community from a liability. The recording continued. The enforcer in crimson admitting to fabricating noise complaints, coordinating anonymous threatening texts to encourage us to leave, even contacting Kyle and David's police departments with false complaints to remove their support system. It was a confession. Complete, damning, recorded proof of everything she'd done. She's still planning to hold the emergency meeting tonight, Dale said when I called him back. 7 p.m. at the community center. She's confident she can force the vote before any investigations conclude. She thinks she can present us with a fait accompli. House sale approved, you evicted, game over before the authorities can intervene. How many board members will vote with her? 3 for sure. Linda and I will vote against. That makes it 3-2 in her favor. Dale's voice dropped. Marcus, I'm sorry. Even with everything we've done, she might still win tonight. I looked at the evidence spread across my table. The insurance suspension notice, the real estate commission investigation, the DA's acknowledgement, the building inspector's scheduled site visit to her rental properties tomorrow. The tyrant in heels might win the board vote, but she'd already lost the war. Dale, how many families has Brenda targeted over the years? Dozens, maybe 50 in total. Most moved away quietly. Can you get me a list, names, addresses if you have them? Silence. Then, you're going to bring them to the what meeting? I'm going to give them a chance to be heard, maybe for the first time. Emma appeared in my doorway, having heard everything. She looked pale but determined. I want to speak tonight, she said. At the meeting, I want to tell them what she did to me. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Mom said to be brave when it matters. She held up Sarah's letter, clutched in her hand like a talisman. This matters. My 16-year-old daughter, who'd been afraid to leave her room 3 days ago, was ready to face down the woman who'd nearly killed her. If Emma could be that brave, so could I. I called Rick Patterson, my property manager contact. How fast can you get me in touch with every real estate agent who's had problems with Brenda Castellano? Give me 2 hours. By noon, I had contact information for 12 agents who'd filed complaints about Brenda's unethical practices. By 2 p.m., I'd spoken with 6 families who'd been driven out of Oak Haven Estates by the board chair's harassment. By 4 p.m., 3 of those families had agreed to drive back for tonight's meeting. The officer of rules had spent 8 years building her empire through intimidation and isolation. Tonight, she'd learn what happens when the isolated come together. The community center meeting room could hold maybe 80 people. By 6:30 p.m., 90 were crowded inside, with more arriving every minute. Word had spread through Oak Haven Estates like wildfire. The emergency meeting to remove the Chen family was happening tonight. What Brenda Castellano didn't know was that half the crowd wasn't there to support her. I stood in the back with my brothers, watching the tyrant in heels arrange her materials at the front table. She wore a navy suit tonight, perfectly pressed, her expression confident. She thought she'd already won. 3 board votes secured, majority locked in, Chen family gone by midnight. Emma sat beside me, wearing her mother's necklace, a simple silver chain Sarah had worn every day of her nursing career. My daughter's hands trembled slightly, but she'd insisted on coming. Dr. Patel sat on her other side, ready to intervene if Emma's anxiety spiked. Dale caught my eye from his board seat. He looked terrified, but resolute. Linda Morrison, the secretary, kept glancing nervously at Brenda, then at the growing crowd. "This is a larger turnout than expected," Brenda announced at 6:55, irritation creeping into her voice. "We'll need to limit public comment to keep this efficient." "Actually," Dale said, standing, "according to HOA bylaws, all residents have the right to speak at emergency meetings. No time limit specified." The board chair's eyes narrowed. "Fine, let's begin." She launched into her prepared presentation, a 40-minute slideshow of evidence against our family. Photos of my brother's vehicles, noise complaint logs that I knew were fabricated, character witnesses who testified that I was unstable and aggressive, none of whom had ever spoken to me directly. When she showed the slide about Emma's hospitalization, describing it as proof of our dangerous home environment, I felt my daughter flinch beside me. "The medical records clearly show this child was in distress due to the resident's behavior and associations," Brenda continued, her voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who'd never been challenged. "For the safety of this community and this minor, I'm recommending immediate forced sale with a 30-day eviction notice." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some supportive of Brenda, some uncertain. "Now, I'll entertain a motion to vote," the enforcer in crimson said. "Point of order." James stood, and every eye turned to him. He wore his police uniform, 3 service medals visible on his chest. "Before any vote occurs, I'd like to present information relevant to this board's decision-making authority." Brenda's jaw tightened. "This is a board meeting, not a public forum. According to Colorado HOA Statute 3833.209.5, residents have the right to present evidence relevant to disciplinary proceedings." James walked to the front, handed Dale a document. "This is notification from Mountain West Community Insurance that your HOA's liability coverage has been suspended as of this morning. Any votes taken by this board are now creating personal liability for each board member." The 3 board members who'd promised Brenda their votes suddenly looked very uncomfortable. "That's a temporary administrative hold," she snapped. "It will be resolved." "Will it?" Kyle stepped forward, also in uniform. "Because I also have documentation here from the Colorado Real Estate Commission showing your license is under investigation for ethics violations, and a letter from the County District Attorney's Office regarding criminal charges for filing false police reports." The room exploded in whispers. Brenda's face went white, then red. "This is a coordinated attack by a vindictive resident." "No," Dale interrupted, his voice shaking but clear. "This is accountability, something this board should have provided 8 years ago." He stood, pulled out a folder, began reading. Email dated March 2019 from Brenda Castellano to the board. "The Rodriguez family's special needs child is depressing property values. I've arranged for noise complaints to encourage them to relocate." He looked up. "Maria Rodriguez is here tonight. She drove 3 hours to tell her story." A woman in the 3rd row stood, mid-40s, exhausted looking, wearing a waitress uniform like she'd come straight from work. "My daughter has autism," Maria said, voice breaking. "She makes sounds when she's happy, humming mostly. This woman," she pointed at Brenda, "filed 17 noise complaints against us, called CPS twice, claiming we were neglecting her. My husband had a heart attack from the stress. We lost our house, our savings, everything. My daughter still has nightmares about the HOA lady who said she was wrong for existing." The crowd was silent now, riveted. "June 2021, Dale continued. Email regarding the Henderson family. Brenda wrote, single mother, 2 kids, barely making mortgage payments, perfect target for forced sale. I have a buyer lined up who'll pay premium." Another family stood, woman with 2 teenagers. "That was us," the woman said. My husband died in Afghanistan. Brenda Castellano made my life hell until we left. My daughter stopped eating. My son started fights at school. We lost everything because she wanted our property for some investor who'd pay more. One by one, they came forward. The families Brenda had destroyed. 8 years of victims, finally given a voice. An elderly man whose wife's garden had been deemed non-compliant and destroyed while she was in the hospital dying of cancer. A veteran with PTSD who'd been fined into bankruptcy for aggressive behavior, which meant he'd ask questions at a board meeting. A teacher who'd been targeted for having a rainbow flag in her window during Pride Month. Each story more devastating than the last. Each one documented in Dale's meticulous records, backed by emails where the officer of rules had bragged about her conquests. If stories of everyday people standing up to injustice resonate with you, there's a whole community here fighting similar battles. These aren't just stories. They're reminders that courage is contagious and accountability matters. Brenda tried to interrupt, to object, to regain control, but the room had turned against her. Even her 3 guaranteed votes were looking at her with disgust. Finally, Emma stood. My brave, broken daughter walked to the front of the room, Dr. Patel staying close behind her. "My name is Emma Chen," she said, voice soft but steady. "I'm 16 years old. 3 weeks ago, I tried to kill myself." The silence was absolute. Not because of my dad, not because of my uncles, because of her. Emma pointed at Brenda. "She made me believe our family was wrong, that having people who love me was dangerous, that my mom's memorial bench, the only place I can feel close to her, would be taken away. She made me so scared that my body just gave up." Emma pulled up her sleeves, showed the room her scars. Several people gasped. "My mom died when I was 13. Cancer. She was a nurse. She saved people's lives every day." Emma's voice strengthened. "Before she died, she wrote me a letter. She said to stand up for what matters, even when you're scared. This house matters. My family matters. And I'm not going to let someone take that away just because she thinks we're worth less than property values." She sat down, and I saw tears on at least a dozen faces. Brenda stood, opened her mouth to speak. "Motion to remove Brenda Castellano as HOA president, effective immediately," Linda Morrison said suddenly. "Second," Dale said. "All in favor?" 4 hands went up. Only Brenda voted against. The enforcer in crimson had been dethroned. Brenda Castellano didn't leave quietly. She stood at the front of that community center, face contorted with rage, and screamed at the board that had just voted her out. "You can't do this. I built this HOA. I protected property values while the rest of you did nothing." She pointed at me, hands shaking. "That man and his military thugs orchestrated this entire circus. You're all falling for a sob story from a troubled teenager and a vindictive—" "Ms. Castellano," Linda Morrison interrupted, her voice cold. "You're no longer president. You need to leave. I'll sue every single one of you. I'll tie this HOA up in litigation for years. You'll what?" Kyle stepped forward, his badge visible on his belt. "Continue making threats in front of 90 witnesses and 2 police officers? Because I'm happy to add that to the criminal complaint already filed with the DA." The former board chair grabbed her materials, shoving papers into her briefcase with jerky, violent movements. As she stormed toward the exit, she stopped beside Emma. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You think you've won? You're still a damaged little girl who couldn't handle a few HOA citations without falling apart. What happens when life gets really hard?" Dr. Patel stood instantly. "That's enough." But Emma looked up at Brenda, this woman who'd nearly destroyed her, and said quietly, "I survived losing my mom. I survived you. I'm stronger than you'll ever be." Brenda left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The meeting continued for another hour. Linda Morrison was voted in as interim president. Dale presented a motion to make Sarah's memorial bench a permanent protected community fixture, passed unanimously. The forced sale petition against our family was formally withdrawn and destroyed. But I knew it wasn't over. The tyrant in heels might have lost her position, but she still had her real estate business, her rental properties, her connections. She'd regroup, find another way to attack. We needed to finish this. The next morning, I received an email from Mountain West Community Insurance's legal team. They wanted to meet, along with their investigator, an HOA board representative, and me. The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon. They're building a case for dropping coverage entirely, Rick Patterson explained when I called him. But they'll also want assurance that you won't sue the HOA for damages. Insurance companies hate uncertainty. What if I do want to sue? Then they'll definitely drop coverage. The HOA will likely dissolve or go bankrupt, and Brenda will face personal liability. But it'll take years and cost you money you don't have. He paused. Unless you're willing to settle for something else. Like what? Policy changes, oversight, making sure this never happens to another family. I thought about Maria Rodriguez, still working as a waitress because she'd lost everything. The Henderson family, scattered to different states. The veteran who'd filed bankruptcy. 8 years of victims. I want more than policy changes, I said. That afternoon, I met with James and Kyle at Kyle's house. We spread out everything we had. Dale's financial records, the recording of Brenda's threats, building inspection reports on her rental properties. The building inspector found serious violations, Kyle reported. Illegal electrical work in 2 properties, unpermitted structural changes in another, fire code violations in all 4. She's looking at minimum $50,000 in fines and mandatory repairs. He's also referring it to the licensing board. Real Estate Commission investigation is moving forward, James added. They've subpoenaed 8 years of her HOA records. With Dale's evidence, they're building a case for license revocation, not just suspension. And the DA? Still reviewing the false report charges. It's borderline. She technically didn't lie about seeing tactical gear, just wildly exaggerated the threat level. But combined with everything else, they're considering reckless endangerment charges related to Emma's medical emergency. I pulled up Brenda's real estate website on my laptop. Her professional photo smiled out from the screen, confident, successful, untouchable. She's still actively listing properties, I noted, still advertising Oak Haven Estates as her specialty. Not for long, Kyle said. Once her license gets suspended, those listings transfer to other agents. She loses her income stream. What about her rental properties, if she can't afford the repairs and fines? She'll be forced to sell at a loss, probably to cover legal costs too, once the Real Estate Commission and DA are done with her. We sat in silence, watching 8 years of carefully constructed empire begin to crumble. Is it enough? I asked. She loses her board position, maybe her license, maybe faces criminal charges. But does it actually change anything for the families she destroyed? James looked at me. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about the Rodriguez family's medical bills, the Hendersons' bankruptcy, all the money these families lost because the officer of rules decided they weren't profitable enough to exist. I pulled up my security consulting contract templates. I'm thinking about civil liability and restitution. You want her to pay back the families she targeted? I want to make it so expensive to be a tyrant that nobody tries it again. Over the next 3 days, I worked with James to contact every family Dale had identified. We documented their losses, medical bills, moving costs, legal fees, property sale losses, therapy costs for traumatized children. The total came to over $400,000 across 12 families. Then I contacted a lawyer, not for me, for a class action civil suit against Brenda Castellano, personally for intentional infliction of emotional distress, harassment, and abuse of authority. This is ambitious, the attorney said after reviewing everything. But you have documentation most plaintiffs only dream about. Recorded confessions, written evidence of intent, measurable damages, medical records. If even half these families join the suit, Ms. Castellano is looking at massive personal liability. How massive? Her rental properties alone are worth maybe $1.2 million. Add in her other assets, retirement accounts, savings. She'd be financially destroyed, complete bankruptcy. I thought about Emma's scars, Maria Rodriguez's autistic daughter who still had nightmares, the Henderson girl who stopped speaking for 8 months. File it, I said. The lawsuit was served on Brenda Castellano on a Tuesday morning. I know because she called me 30 minutes later, screaming, "You're trying to take everything from me. My business, my properties, my livelihood. Over what? Enforcing HOA rules?" "No," I said calmly. Over 8 years of systematically destroying families for profit. There's a difference. I'll fight this. I'll bury you in legal motions. I have the best attorneys in Colorado. You had the best attorneys. Past tense. Your retainer just bounced. I checked. Mountain West Insurance dropped the HOA's coverage yesterday, and your personal malpractice insurance won't cover intentional acts. You're on your own now. Silence on the other end, then quieter. What do you want? I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything because someone more powerful decided you don't deserve to exist. I hung up. That evening, I sat with Emma at Sarah's memorial bench. The brass plaque gleamed in the sunset. Sarah Chen, 1987 to 2021. ER nurse, beloved wife and mother, forever in our hearts. Is it really over? Emma asked. Almost. The real estate commission hearing is next week. The civil suit will take months, but the important part, we're safe. This is still our home. Mom's bench is protected, and you're healing. Emma leaned against my shoulder, something she hadn't done since before Sarah died. Mom would be proud of you, she whispered. She'd be prouder of you. You were braver than any of us. We sat there as the sun set over Oak Haven Estates, finally at peace. The Colorado Real Estate Commission hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning at 9. I wasn't required to attend. This was between the commission and Brenda Castellano, but Dale called me the night before. She's going to claim everything was taken out of context, he said, that she was just enforcing rules, that we're persecuting her for doing her job. She's hired a lawyer who specializes in defending agents against licensing complaints. Will it work? It might. The commission has to prove she violated specific ethics rules, and Brenda's good at technicalities. She's survived 2 previous investigations. Dale paused. Unless someone testifies who can speak to pattern and intent. You already gave them your records. Records are one thing. A live witness explaining 8 years of systematic abuse is another. The families she targeted, Maria Rodriguez, the Hendersons, the others, they'd be powerful testimony. But most of them can't afford to miss work, can't face her again. His voice dropped. But you could. You and Emma. I looked across the living room where Emma sat doing homework, her therapist's latest assignment. Right about a time you felt powerful. She'd been working on it for an hour, filling pages. Let me talk to her, I said. Emma listened as I explained what testifying would mean, facing the former board chair again, telling her story to strangers, making everything public record. Will it stop her from hurting other people? She asked. Maybe. If they revoke her license, she loses her income, her professional reputation. She'd have to start over in a different career. Emma thought about it, then showed me what she'd been writing, page after page describing the night she collapsed, the months of fear before it, the moment she decided to speak at the HOA meeting. I wrote about feeling powerful when I told the truth, she said, even though I was scared, even though my hands were shaking, because telling the truth about someone who hurt you is the most powerful thing you can do. She looked at me with Sarah's eyes, determined, brave, ready. I'll testify, she said, for all the families who can't. The hearing room was smaller than I expected. A long table where 3 commission members sat, another table for Brenda and her attorney, chairs for witnesses. Maybe 20 seats for observers, mostly empty except for Dale, my brothers, and Dr. Patel. Brenda wore a gray suit, hair pulled back, expression neutral. Professional. She barely glanced at us when we entered. The commission investigator presented his findings first. Documentation of self-dealing, misuse of HOA position for personal gain, discriminatory enforcement of rules, 40 minutes of evidence all drawn from Dale's meticulous records. Brenda's attorney objected repeatedly. These are HOA internal matters, not real estate violations. Ms. Castellano's board role is separate from her professional licensing. When a licensed agent uses an HOA position to manipulate property values for personal financial gain, it becomes our concern, the lead commissioner said dryly. But I could see the other 2 commissioners looked uncertain. Technicalities and jurisdictional questions were clouding the water. Then the investigator called Emma to testify. My daughter walked to the witness chair, Dr. Patel close behind her. Emma's hands trembled as she was sworn in, but her voice stayed steady. Can you tell us about your interactions with Ms. Castellano? The investigator asked. Emma described everything: the escalating citations, the harassment of her uncles, the terror that they'd lose their home and her mother's memorial bench, the night she collapsed. "I have PTSD from watching my mom die," Emma said quietly. "But I was getting better. Therapy was helping. Family gatherings with my uncles were helping. And then Ms. Castellano decided my family didn't belong in the neighborhood. She didn't just enforce rules, she targeted everything that was keeping me alive." She pulled up her sleeve, showed her scars to the commission. "These are from cutting myself, because I was so scared we'd lose our house. I tried to kill myself because I thought everyone would be better off if I was gone. I was 16 years old, and I wanted to die because that woman," Emma pointed at Brenda, "decided my family wasn't profitable enough to exist in her neighborhood." One of the commissioners, an older woman, looked at Brenda with open disgust. Brenda's attorney stood. "This is emotional manipulation. Ms. Castellano isn't responsible for this teenager's mental health issues. She called the police claiming my uncles were armed threats when she knew they were SWAT officers," Emma interrupted. "She tried to get them investigated so I'd lose my support system. She told my friend's grandfather that I was unstable influence and forced them to end our friendship. She sent anonymous threatening texts to my dad. She did everything she could to isolate us and terrorize us until we left. That's not enforcing rules. That's destroying a family on purpose." The tyrant in heels stared at the table, refusing to meet Emma's eyes. "Do you have evidence of Ms. Castellano's intent?" the investigator asked. "Dale Pritchard recorded her admitting it," Emma said. "She said military families lower property values, that I was damaged goods from losing my mom, that targeting us would make the neighborhood more attractive for her real estate listings." The investigator played the recording. Brenda's voice filled the hearing room, cold, calculating, proud of her strategy. When it finished, the silence was damning. "Ms. Castellano," the lead commissioner said, "do you have a response?" Her attorney whispered urgently in her ear. Brenda shook her head, pushed him away. "That recording was made without my knowledge," she said. "It's inadmissible." "This isn't a criminal trial," the commissioner replied. "Colorado is a one-party consent state, and we can consider any relevant evidence." "Then yes, I said those things, because they're true." The officer of rules finally looked up, defiant. "I spent 8 years building Oak Haven Estates into a premium community. Property values increased 40% under my leadership. I made that neighborhood desirable, profitable, successful. And sometimes that meant encouraging families who didn't fit the community standards to relocate. That's not a crime. It's strategic property management." "You put a child in the hospital," the female commissioner said softly. "I enforced HOA bylaws. If that family had simply followed the rules—" "There were no rules being broken," I said, standing. "You fabricated violations to force us out. You targeted my daughter's mental health support system. You called the police hoping for a violent confrontation. You did all of it for profit." Brenda turned to me, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes, because she'd finally realized the truth. She'd lost. Not just the hearing, everything. The lead commissioner spoke. "Ms. Castellano, based on the evidence presented, this commission finds you violated Ethics Rules 6.1, 6.4, and 8.2. Misuse of professional position, discriminatory practices, and conduct demonstrating unfitness to hold a real estate license. Your license is hereby revoked, effective immediately. You have 30 days to close all active transactions and transfer clients to other agents." The clipboard queen's empire crumbled in a single sentence. She sat frozen as her attorney gathered papers, whispered about appeals, tried to salvage something. But it was over. Emma reached for my hand as we left the hearing room. Outside, spring sunshine felt like a promise. "She can't hurt anyone else now," Emma said. "No," I agreed. "She can't." The civil lawsuit hearing was set for 3 weeks later. 12 families had joined the class action against Brenda Castellano, everyone from Maria Rodriguez to the Hendersons, who'd driven back from Arizona specifically to face the woman who'd destroyed their lives. Our attorney, Patricia Valdez, had warned me this wouldn't be like the real estate commission hearing. Civil court is about money and damages. The judge won't care about justice or feelings, only provable harm and compensation. We need to demonstrate clear causation between Brenda's actions and each family's losses. The courtroom was packed. All 12 families, their children, supporters from Oak Haven Estates. Linda Morrison attended as the new HOA president, bringing official records to support our claims. Dale sat in the front row, looking more confident than I'd ever seen him. Brenda arrived with a different attorney. The expensive firm had apparently dropped her after the license revocation. This lawyer looked young, overwhelmed, like he'd pulled the short straw at his firm. The former board chair looked different too. No designer suit today, just slacks and a simple blouse. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup, dark circles under her eyes. The building code fines had hit her hard, $73,000 in violations and mandatory repairs. Her rental properties were in foreclosure. Her real estate business had evaporated the moment her license was revoked. The tyrant in heels was already broken. This hearing would just make it official. Judge Catherine Morrison, no relation to Linda, called the court to order. Patricia stood, began presenting our case. Your Honor, this isn't a typical civil suit. This is 12 families, spanning 8 years, all targeted by the same individual using the same systematic methods. Ms. Castellano weaponized her HOA position to force out families she deemed undesirable, causing measurable financial and emotional damage. We're seeking compensation for medical expenses, moving costs, lost property value, therapy costs, and emotional distress. She called Maria Rodriguez first. Maria described how Brenda's harassment had driven her family from their home, caused her husband's heart attack, traumatized her autistic daughter. She presented medical bills totaling $89,000, most of it from her husband's cardiac care and her daughter's therapy. We lost our house to foreclosure, Maria said, voice breaking. Lost our savings paying medical bills. My daughter still screams when she sees official-looking envelopes because she thinks it's another HOA violation. She's 14 years old and has panic attacks over mail. The Henderson family testified next. Jennifer Henderson explained how Brenda's campaign had destroyed her family after her husband's military death. She targeted us because I was a widow, because my kids were struggling with grief, because she decided we made the neighborhood look unstable, Jennifer said. We filed bankruptcy. My son attempted suicide. My daughter developed an eating disorder. All because that woman decided we were worth less than property values. One by one, they came forward. Families destroyed, children traumatized, lives derailed. Each story backed by documentation, medical records, therapy bills, foreclosure notices, bankruptcy filings. Patricia presented the evidence methodically. Dale's recordings proving intent. Email chains showing coordination. Financial records demonstrating Brenda's self-dealing. Dr. Patel's expert testimony about psychological harm. The cumulative damages exceed $400,000, Patricia concluded. But more importantly, these families deserve recognition that what happened to them was wrong, that Ms. Castellano's actions were deliberate, malicious, and caused real harm. Brenda's attorney stood for her defense. He looked uncomfortable. Your Honor, while we acknowledge Ms. Castellano made errors in judgment during her tenure as HOA president, the plaintiff's claims are exaggerated. Many of these families had pre-existing financial difficulties. Correlation isn't causation. My client was simply enforcing community standards. By targeting vulnerable families? Judge Morrison interrupted. By fabricating violations? By calling the police with false reports about armed threats to scare residents into leaving? Those are allegations. Those are recorded confessions. The judge picked up the transcript of Dale's recording. I've read Ms. Castellano's own words. She admitted to targeting families based on demographics, mental health status, and socioeconomic factors. She bragged about making them relocate. She described it as strategic property management. She looked at Brenda directly. Would you like to testify in your own defense, Ms. Castellano? The former officer of rules stood slowly. Her attorney tried to stop her, but she waved him off. Yes, Your Honor, I'd like to speak. The courtroom went silent. Brenda walked to the a witness stand, was sworn in, sat down carefully. For a long moment, she just stared at her hands. I spent 8 years building Oak Haven Estates into a premium community, she began. Property values increased significantly under my leadership. The neighborhood became desirable, well-maintained, profitable. She looked up at the judge. I believed I was doing the right thing, protecting investments, maintaining standards. By driving out families with special needs children? Judge Morrison asked. By targeting veterans with PTSD? By harassing a widowed teenager until she nearly died? Brenda flinched. I didn't see them as people. I saw them as problems, variables that lowered property values, obstacles to overcome. Her voice cracked. I told myself it was business, strategic decisions, that I was protecting the community. She turned to face the families in the gallery. Maria, your daughter's humming was just noise to me. I never thought about what it meant to her, why she did it, how my complaints would affect her. She looked at Jennifer Henderson. Your family's grief made me uncomfortable, so I decided you needed to leave. I never considered that you just lost everything and I was taking the rest. Finally, she looked at Emma, sitting between me and Dr. Patel. You were 16 years old and I called you damaged goods. I tried to eliminate your support system because it didn't fit my image of the perfect neighborhood. I nearly killed you. Tears ran down her face. I nearly killed a child because I cared more about property values than people. The courtroom was absolutely silent. I can't undo what I did, Brenda continued. I can't give you back your homes, your health, your sense of safety. I have $147,000 left in liquid assets after the building fines and legal fees. My rental properties are in foreclosure. My retirement account is all I have left, about $280,000. It's not enough to cover all the damages, but it's everything I have. She looked at Judge Morrison. I'm pleading guilty to all claims. I'm requesting the court distribute my assets among the plaintiff families as restitution. I don't want to fight anymore. I just want to try to make it right. Her attorney looked stunned. This wasn't the defense they'd planned. Judge Morrison studied Brenda for a long moment. This is highly irregular, Ms. Castellano. I know, Your Honor, but these families deserve more than legal battles and appeals. They deserve acknowledgement and compensation. I'm offering both. Patricia leaned over to me. This is unprecedented. She's essentially agreeing to financial destruction. The judge called a recess. 20 minutes later, she returned with her ruling. Given Ms. Castellano's admission of liability and offer of full asset surrender, I'm approving a consent judgment. All liquid assets and proceeds from property sales will be distributed among the plaintiff families proportional to documented damages. Ms. Castellano will face structured payments from future earnings until all claims are satisfied. She looked at Brenda. You'll likely be paying restitution for the next decade. You understand this? Yes, Your Honor. Then this court finds in favor of the plaintiffs. Ms. Castellano is ordered to pay full restitution as outlined. Court adjourned. We stood as the judge left. The families around me were crying. Relief, vindication, closure. Emma squeezed my hand. Is it really over? I looked at Brenda, being led away by her attorney, her empire completely destroyed. Yes, I said. It's really over. 2 months later, Emma and I sat at Sarah's memorial bench watching the sunset. It had become our Thursday evening ritual, just the two of us, talking about the week, remembering Mom, planning for the future. The bench had a new addition now, a small plaque beneath Sarah's name, Oak Haven Estates Community Memorial Garden, dedicated to all who find healing. Here, Linda Morrison's idea. The HOA board had voted to expand the memorial area, adding benches for other families who wanted to honor loved ones. It wasn't just Sarah's place anymore, it belonged to everyone. Hannah's coming over tomorrow, Emma said, smiling. We're going to watch movies and bake cookies. Her grandpa said we can be friends again. Dale Pritchard had become something of a neighborhood hero after everything settled. He'd been elected HOA president by unanimous vote, replacing Linda, who'd only wanted to serve temporarily. His first act was implementing term limits. No president could serve more than 2 years. His second was creating an oversight committee to review all board decisions. That's great, Em. I know you've missed her. I missed a lot of things. She pulled out her phone, showed me a photo from yesterday. Emma and 3 other girls at school, laughing at lunch. I made new friends too. Therapy's helping. Dr. Patel says I'm actually processing grief now, instead of just surviving it. The self-harm had stopped. Not immediately. Healing wasn't linear. But Emma's arms had been clear for 6 weeks now, and she'd started a journal instead, writing about her feelings, her mother, her hope for the future. My phone buzzed, a text from James. Monthly gathering still on for Saturday? Kyle's bringing his famous ribs. I smiled. Absolutely. Tell him to bring extra. Emma's inviting Hannah. The family gatherings had resumed, bigger than before. No fear, no citations, no hostile HOA president documenting violations. Just family, laughter, healing. Dad, Emma's voice pulled me back. Do you think Mom would be proud of what we did? I thought about Sarah, my fierce, compassionate wife, who'd spent her life fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves, who'd faced cancer with courage I'd never fully understood until I'd had to find my own. Yeah, Em, I think she'd be incredibly proud of both of us. Even though we destroyed someone's life, I'd been waiting for this question. Emma was too, empathetic not to eventually struggle with what had happened to Brenda Castellano. We didn't destroy her life. We held her accountable for destroying others. There's a difference. I turned to face my daughter. Brenda made choices. For 8 years, she chose to hurt vulnerable families for profit. We gave those families a voice and a chance at justice. That's not destruction. That's accountability. She lost everything, though. And 12 families got compensation for what she took from them. Maria Rodriguez's daughter is back in therapy and improving. The Hendersons bought a small house with their settlement money. 3 other families were able to pay off medical debt. I paused. Brenda's consequences were severe because her actions were severe. But she chose to accept responsibility in the end. That counts for something. Emma nodded slowly, processing. Dr. Patel says feeling empathy for people who hurt you is a sign of healing. That it means you're not consumed by anger anymore. Smart woman? I hope Brenda gets help, Emma said quietly. I hope she figures out how to be better. But I'm glad she can't hurt anyone else. We sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon. Oak Haven Estates had changed in the past 2 months. More families were attending board meetings. The new oversight committee had already caught and corrected 2 questionable decisions. Dale had organized neighborhood potlucks, community cleanup days, events that brought people together instead of driving them apart. The 12 families from the lawsuit had formed their own support group, survivors of HOA abuse who now advocated for reform. Patricia Valdez had connected them with state legislators working on HOA accountability laws. Their testimony had helped push through new regulations requiring independent oversight and limiting board authority. Something good had come from the pain. My phone buzzed again. This time, an email from Rick Patterson with the subject line, "Thought you'd want to see this." Inside was a news article. Former real estate agent begins work at domestic violence shelter. I want to help people I once would have hurt. The article featured a photo of Brenda Castellano, looking older, humbler, working at a crisis center in Denver. She'd taken a job doing administrative work, making barely above minimum wage, slowly paying her restitution. The article quoted her, "I spent years seeing people as problems to eliminate instead of humans deserving dignity. Now I'm learning to help instead of hurt. It doesn't undo what I did, but maybe I can prevent someone else from becoming what I was." I showed Emma, she read it twice, then looked at me with tears in her eyes. "She's trying to change," Emma whispered. "Yeah, she is. Does that make you angry that she gets a second chance?" "No," I said honestly. "It makes me hopeful. Because if someone like Brenda Castellano can recognize she was wrong and try to be better, then maybe the world isn't as broken as it sometimes feels." Emma leaned against my shoulder, and we watched the stars begin to appear. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, Em." We walked home as streetlights flickered on, our house glowing warm and welcoming in the distance. Our home, still ours, still safe. Inside, I pulled out Sarah's letter, the one she'd written to me before she died, the companion to Emma's. I hadn't read it in months, but tonight felt right. "Marcus, my love, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're raising Emma alone. I know you're scared. I know you think you're not enough, but you are. You're the strongest person I've ever known. Not because you don't break, everyone breaks sometimes, but because when you do break, you find a way to put yourself back together and keep going. Protect our daughter. Teach her to be brave. Show her that standing up for what's right is worth the cost. And remember that I loved you until my last breath and beyond. Don't let anyone make you small. Don't let anyone convince you that you don't belong. You and Emma are warriors. Act like it. Forever yours, Sarah. I folded the letter carefully, placed it back in its envelope. Then I went to check on Emma. She was already in bed, reading, content. Night, Dad. Night, sweetheart. I stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her. Happy, healing, home. We'd fought for this. For safety, for dignity, for the right to exist without persecution. And we'd won. Not just for us, for 12 families who'd been silenced, for future families who'd be protected by new laws, for every person who'd ever been made to feel small by someone with arbitrary power. This story started with a collapse on a driveway, and a woman who thought she was untouchable. It ended with a community transformed, a daughter healing, and accountability finally served. If you've ever felt powerless against bureaucratic cruelty, if you've ever wondered whether standing up to injustice is worth the cost, let me tell you, it is. Every single time. Our fight took months. It cost money we didn't have, and energy we could barely spare. It forced a traumatized teenager to face her worst fears in courtrooms and hearings. It required a scared retiree to find courage he didn't know he had. But it worked. And now, when I sit at my wife's memorial bench with my daughter beside me, I can tell Sarah's memory that I kept my promise. I protected Emma. I taught her to be brave. I showed her that standing up for what's right is worth everything. We're not just survivors anymore. We're warriors. If this story resonated with you, if you fought similar battles or are fighting them now, share your experience in the comments. Let's build a community of people who refuse to be silenced. Hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, what injustice you're facing, how you found the courage to fight back. Because every story of accountability matters. Every voice that refuses to be quiet matters, and together, we're unstoppable.